Welcome back to my very, very favorite topic, agriculture. And I hope it's yours too. Hopefully you guys have been watching the AP review, right? And you've seen that they have talked in pretty much every review video they've done. There's always something that comes back to agriculture. So you really need to be super, super familiar with at least a general working knowledge of this stuff. Because it's just, as you know, it affects everything. Without agriculture, you don't have cities, which grow into civilizations and languages and religions and all kinds of, urbanization, all kinds of stuff. So it's really, really important that you are spending some time with this particular topic. All right, so let's get started. Let's start with a pre-agricultural society, right? Because we know that there are shifts in agriculture as we move through time. Right? Things change and improve, and because of those changes and improvements, other things follow. So if we're talking from a historical perspective, you got to start before the first agricultural revolution. And we're basically talking about hunters and gatherers, right? People who were nomadic. They would not move every day, not every week, but maybe once or twice a year. They would move and follow the migratory animals, the herds, right? The men were traditionally farmers. The women were not the farmers, the hunters, and women were the gatherers. And I hope you've noticed one thing too in the review, that they've talked a lot about gender, right? The differences between men and women, not just in agriculture, but, with regards to working, education, right? Roles, gender inequality. It's kind of been a big theme. So I'm hoping you guys are familiar and be able to discuss those differences as we move through. All right, so hunter-gatherers, they'd move with the herds. The men would hunt, the women would gather, and they would typically come back to the same places every time. Because this isn't just nomadic wandering wherever. You have to wander to a place where you know you're going to be able to find enough food to feed however big your group was, and how much you could feed them was limited how big your group was. So in a pre-agricultural society without farming as we know it today, you don't have settlements and you have small groups. If the group gets too big, then they have to go off and start their own group, right? It is through this period of time that probably women are noticing, as they come back to the same places every time, that there are the same plants in the same places, right? And then, hundreds, if not thousands of years later, they'll start to notice that where they basically threw away their trash, right, their refuge, they would find seeds that had grown into plants as well, right? So they are learning and gathering information about the stuff they gather as they're moving through this period of time. Right, which then will lead us to agriculture, or the first agricultural revolution. Right, the first agricultural revolution kind of happens in multiple parts. Right, probably the first thing you see is what they call plant domestication. Right, the ability to turn a plant into something you can use. Right, so you are now controlling it as opposed to just finding it. You are controlling it. Right, we look and we know that there are several various hearths during this period of time. This one has a bunch of additional ones, but the main ones that we know of are here in the Fertile Crescent, probably where it started, and over here in the Nile River Valley. Over this period of time in the pre-agricultural societies, you are gathering this knowledge of plants and seeds, and probably it was plants that were domesticated first. So you might take them from places that you find and put them in a confined area, right? You are kind of putting them in an area where you have some control over it. They are gathering knowledge of which plants produce the most, right? Which are the biggest, which grow the fastest, right? And then probably hundreds to thousands of years later, you're going to get seed domestication. They're starting to experiment with seeds. Which ones, again, grow fastest, grow the best? What do they need to grow and produce food for them? Animal domestication will come later, and that is taming of wild animals for the benefit of people, right? Cows, chickens, pigs, sheep are all of some of the more popular and most successfully domesticated animals. Other animals, right, have not been so successfully domesticated. And where in core countries, it's real typical to find that those are where the animals that are most domesticated flourish. Right? So over this period of time, and again, it's thousands of years, right? We are learning agriculture, how to transplant and care for plants, eventually seeds, and then animals itself. What does this allow societies to do? Now you can have a settlement, right? You don't necessarily have to keep traveling with the herds. The hunters can go off, on hunting parties and be gone for a long period of time and follow the herds, but women and children can stay in the settlement, build permanent houses, and depending on how successful you are, your population in your tribe can grow. All right, let's move on to the second agricultural revolution. Right, this is around 1500 to 1900, right, that this goes on. And basically the second agricultural revolution is characterized by technology. Right, we are mechanizing. The steam engine comes in. You have things like the cotton gin, the thresher. You have seed drills, things that help you plant more food. Right? Remember we talked about that there's a limited period of planting time and harvesting time, and you are limited by how much you can plant and how much you can harvest. If you have a machine that can increase the ability to plant and harvest, you can grow more food. If you can grow more food, you can have a bigger settlement. However, also as you mechanize, you need less people working. So where are those people going to go? They're going to go to the cities and be involved in the Industrial Revolution in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. You can't have an industrial revolution unless you have an agricultural revolution. You can't have all these people going to live in cities to work in factories if you cannot feed them. Right? You also have some levels of pesticide and fertilizers coming in at this period of time. Those have been around for quite a while, probably to the late part of the second agricultural revolution. And then it allows our populations just boom, right? When the Industrial Revolution comes around, and if you go back to our population review and chapter, that's, look at the graphs, and that's when the population just starts to explode, is after this second agricultural revolution. All right, let's move on to the third agricultural revolution. And that sometimes is called the Green Revolution, not because it's energy efficient. We think of green as being energy efficient now, but green back then meant green, right? Growing of more crops, and they are typically done through science, right? We are looking at biology. We are looking at the ability to manipulate seeds and plants. We are looking at perfection of chemicals, not that they're not invented here, but we're perfecting them a bit more, that allow us to fertilize and grow plants that are more pest resistant or drought resistant. The third agricultural revolution helps to feed the booming population that we have. Without this third agricultural revolution, you'd see much more mass starvation, more Malthusian types of suffering, because we don't have don't have enough food for people to eat. Right? It starts with wheat, pretty much in Mexico and the Central American area, but it really takes off with rice, the IR8 that you see up there in the top. Right? It really takes off when we are able to produce produce rice that can be grown in multiple crops. All right. If you've read your books and your materials, you've seen the things called triple cropping and double cropping. All right, it is the ability to grow food so much faster that I can plant not just one, but maybe 2 or 3 crops in a growing season. Grow one, harvest one, grow another one, harvest another one. And that's a tremendous amount of food that we can grow during this particular time. And things like rice have been able to feed all kinds of people that we couldn't have fed before. All right, there's not, this time is not without controversy. Of course, we know that genetically modified foods come into this particular period of time. Probably 70 to 80% of what we eat on a daily basis is genetically modified, right? And it's modified in a couple of ways. It's modified to grow faster, right? It's modified to grow more, right? So instead of 100 bushels of wheat, you can grow 200 bushels of wheat. It makes plants grow bigger. So that tomato you see might be bigger than what it would have been without the genetic modification. It also helps some plants to, or fruits and vegetables to last longer. I was helping a friend do a science experiment with their kids. Where you put the toothpicks in the sweet potatoes and you put them in water and they grow. Interestingly enough, the genetically modified sweet potatoes don't work. You have to go find an organic one. Because they are meant to grow, they are meant not to sprout so fast. So it can help foods last longer. In response to that, you have the organic movement, right, to grow plants and animals without the fertilizers and the pesticides. It is much more labor intensive when you don't use chemical fertilizers. It is somewhat more expensive, and then the end product is more expensive. You can find organic farming everywhere in the United States, in the world, in all, 3 levels: core, periphery, semi-periphery. But core buys the most because that's where the money is, and organic foods tend to grow faster. All right, what's the next one? Subsistence agriculture. And you see that's a pretty good picture of what subsistence agriculture is. Subsistence agriculture, of course, is what most farmers in the world are engaged in. All right, we're going to talk about commercial farming a little bit down the road and some of the different aspects of that. But for most of the farmers in the world, they are subsistence farmers. That is growing enough just for themselves and not for selling, right? These are farmers who typically don't have access to the expensive products and genetically modified, right? They don't have access to money to buy fertilizers and pesticides. So this is labor intensive. These are areas also, tie it back into population, where you are seeing more and more families having more and more children because they need to have more and more hands on deck to help with the subsistence agriculture. All right. We're going to stop here, all right, and we'll pick up in the next one because I'm about to run out of time.